a home here, something we think is worth defending. I mean, why is that so tough to understand?
Sure, and you have the right to defend it in all the accepted ways. Hell, I'll help you. But you can't start by stealing government property.
All right, well, I'm sorry about that, sir, but I've seen what happens when you go the other way. Now, by the time we got up to bat, the game'd be over.
At least you would all be alive, which at this point is all I give a damn about.
Don't worry about us. Escort the colonel back to the gate.
Yes, sir.
You don't have a whole lot of time, Brian.
Colonel Kirby, sir.
As you were, soldier.
Timothy Hutton is a cadet at a military academy having a showdown with a real Army officer in Taps. That's one of 4 movies we'll be reviewing this week on Sneak Previews. Across the aisle from me, Gene Siskel, film critic of the Chicago Tribune.
And this is Roger Ebert, film critic of the Chicago Sun-Times. Now, in addition to Taps, Roger and I will be reviewing Taxi Zum Klo, a controversial West German film about a homosexual schoolteacher. Also, a look at the Walt Disney animated film Cinderella, which has absolutely nothing in common with Taxi Zum Klo, except that it's playing in theaters this week. And later on, we'll also take a look at some of the films we can recommend for the holiday season. But first, Roger begins with a comedy about robots called Heartbeeps.
Well, Heartbeeps tells a dreary, boring, whimsical love story about 2 robots in the last years of the 20th century. They meet at the robot factory, and it's love at first transistor interchange. They wander away together, arm in arm, and along the way, they're joined by a cigar-smoking comedian robot who's named Catskill and tells jokes by Henny Youngman. Well, I couldn't believe it until I read the credits, and they said, Catskill's jokes by Henny Youngman. You'll believe it when you hear the jokes. The robotic lovers soon discover they're being pursued by a mechanical cop and by human technicians who want to return them to the robot factory. And in this scene, the robot couple, played by Andy Kaufman and Bernadette Peters, look for shelter in the cruel world away from their home factory.
We could damage ourselves if we travel in darkness.
The hollow part of the hillside would be a good place for shelter.
Question, what are the probabilities of encountering hostile life?
I have insufficient data. Whoa.
Oh, dear.
For a proper computation.
Do you see an alternative shelter?
Negative. Logically, the wildlife could coexist with our units in the cave. Perhaps there's a way to make the animal mentally aware that we are not a threat.
Val, wait! You could be basing your decision to act on invalid assumptions.
We need shelter for the night, and I think that I am best equipped to attempt to provide it. Oh. Hello? Hi. I am taking a calculated risk, so perhaps you can tell by my lack of weapons and my non-threatening tone that we mean you no harm.
What an exit.
It's hard for us to recognize Andy Kaufman and Bernadette Peters underneath all that makeup. It's also hard for them to push out a performance that means anything in this movie. On the other hand, though, the makeup and the special effects are the only real stars in this dreary movie, creating a world that's sort of a cross between Star Wars and The Wizard of Oz. Before long, Kaufman and Peters feel an urge toward familyhood, and so they build themselves a little child robot named Phil. And in this scene, Kaufman explains the facts of life to Phil. For robots, the biggest fact of life is that your battery pack can run down.
Phil, it will be night soon. What's the matter? Absence of bright lights is not necessarily a problem in accomplishing tasks. For example, at night, remember those tiny lights in the sky? Those are stars. One of them, the North Star, will appear soon, over there. The wonderful place of junk is in that direction. North. That's where our friends are. Do you understand? Good. I don't think you'll be needing this anymore. There's so much information I want you to have. so many new parts that I do not possess. You know, you're the first robot I ever built and programmed. And I want you to know that in spite of problems, you have been performing very well. You are extremely efficient. You aren't concerned about the coming absence of light now, are you? Good. Okay. Come on.
It's about as thrilling as a cold potato pancake. That little robot will remind some people of R2-D2 in Star Wars and his joke-telling robot pal Catskill. That guy has some of the same comic detachment that C-3PO had in the same movie. In fact, the whole movie, Heartbeeps, seemed borrowed from other movies, not only from Star Wars for its robots and The Wizard of Oz for its relationship among the travelers, but even from such an unexpected source as Jean-Luc Godard's famous French movie, Weekend, which is also a fantasy in which innocent characters wander through a threatening, futuristic forest populated with storybook characters and hostile authorities. The only inspiration in Heartbeat was the idea to recycle all those old movie formulas through a story about robots. But the robots and their story are slow and halting and boring. The movie suffers from terminal cuteness.
I think it's a bad film. I'm just thinking about what it'd be like to hear your film compared to a cold potato pancake. And then the other thing, of course, people will say, hey, it's Jean-Luc Godard, not John Locke. At any rate, that was a philosopher. You know that.
Excuse me.
Okay, well, at any rate, I think it's a terrible film because the movie is 88 minutes. I checked this. Before the titles begin, there's a 3-minute sequence in which the two characters, Bernadette Peters and Andy Kaufman, have a touching scene in front of a rainbow, and they have a human emotion. These machines respond to that, okay? That's the whole movie. The other 85 minutes that follow after the title add nothing to the film.
This sounds to me like the kind of the movie that was dreamed up over the wrong lunch. You
Yeah.
know, maybe they ordered the wrong wine or something. The inspiration for this film is totally off base. And furthermore, they didn't come up with any idea for what to do with it once they had the inspiration. Let's put these robots in the story. Fine. Now, how can we make the robots? How can we produce the film?
Nothing.
Who are the robots and what is their story?
Nothing
There is
on
no
the story. There
Right.
is no story. You march them out in the woods, you bring them back. It's terrible. Okay,
right.
Our next film is Walt Disney's Cinderella, the classic animated cartoon feature made in 1949 and released this Christmas for the first time since 1974. You probably know the story. You see, there's this mean old lady with 2 daughters, one stepdaughter. The stepdaughter always gets, as Marilyn Monroe said in Some Like It Hot, the fuzzy end of the lollipop. Fortunately, Cinderella has a fairy godmother.
Good heavens, child. You can't go in there. Now, let's see, dear. Your size and the shade of your eyes. Something simple. But daring, too. Oh, just leave it to me. What a gown this will be. Bibbidi-bobbidi, bibbidi-bobbidi, bibbidi-bobbidi.
Oh, it's a beautiful dress. Did you ever see such a beautiful dress? And look, glass slippers. Why, it's like a dream. A wonderful dream come true.
Yes, my child. But like all dreams, well, I'm afraid this can't last forever. You'll have only till midnight, and then...
Midnight? Oh, thank you.
Oh, no, just a minute. You must understand, my dear. On the stroke of 12, the spell will be broken, and everything will be as it was before.
Oh, I understand, but it's more than I ever hoped for.
Bless you, my child. Goodness me, it's getting late. Hurry up, dear. The ball can't wait. Have a good time. Dance. Be gay. Now off you go. You're on your way.
A nice moment. Disney releases its classic animated films about once every 5 to 7 years. That way, Disney believes a whole new generation of youngsters can see these very entertaining films. So, as you look in vain for a new holiday film for little children this year and don't find any, remember, there is one golden oldie around, and it is called Cinderella.
You know, we might ask ourselves if once we grow into old people now, we're in our 30s, do we lose the magic that we had when we were kids? You know, the magic that we got out of films like this. I don't think so. Some of the recent Disney pictures, the animated films, have been fairly good. For example, we both agree that we like The Fox and the Hound earlier this year. But these earlier ones, Cinderella, Pinocchio, Snow White, they had a magic to them that just hasn't been touched in the last 20 years or so.
I think there literally is a depth to them. I mean, the field of vision and the coloration in the backgrounds that you miss in the current films. I would not put Cinderella, if we're going to be critics on this one film, I would not put Cinderella in the same category as the really classic.
Well, I think Pinocchio is probably the best one of all.
Pinocchio, Snow White, all of these, Dumbo I love too. Those I think are the greatest. This falls to me somewhere in the middle between the great early oldies and the most
It's almost like in the early days they had a joy of making the films, and later on it became a formula or an insight that they thought they had instead of
the whole field of animation has gone through a mechanization, and I think this film falls right in the middle.
Let's move on to a new dramatic film. Our next film, Taps, tells the story of a group of military school cadets who decide to defend their school using military strategies and real weapons after the school's trustees decide to sell the school and turn the property into condominiums. In this scene, the school's headmaster, George C. Scott, first breaks the news that the school is going to be sold. Scott looks and sounds in this scene a lot like he did in his Oscar-winning performance as General Patton, and I think that's supposed to be the idea.
Ladies and gentlemen, for 141 years, old soldiers like myself have stood here on this day and told the finest of America's young men the meaning of the word commencement. It is a beginning, we told them. But today, this day, it has another meaning, an end. An end to nearly a century and a half of tradition, and an end to the heart of us. I have been informed that Bunker Hill Academy is to be closed. All of its buildings torn down, nothing to be left but memories. It is the decision of the Board of Trustees in all their wisdom that this institution be sold and the land developed for its real estate potential. I am a veteran of many terrible battles, but no battle is more important than this one. And this final battle, I intend to win.
That's a very important scene. It takes a star of George C. Scott's stature to carry it off, because that, on the impulse in that speech, the whole movie is going to follow. Well, not long after Scott makes that stubborn declaration, the plot removes him from the movie for a while, and without any adults around, the top-ranking cadet student leader, played by Timothy Hutton, takes control of the school. Hutton is determined to barricade the school and prevent it from being closed. And he sends his cadets into town to pick up provisions. They have a clash with the hostile townies, and in this scene, they report the incident back to Hutton.
I don't ever want to see what I just saw out there. We didn't train to go spastic at the first sign of trouble. Damn, I'm glad the general didn't see that. These cadets will follow you only if they respect you. All right. Sit down, at ease. Okay, how'd we lose the truck?
It stalled out. The townies are Dwyer and me in a hard place.
Sean grabbed the chance to use his shiny new weapon.
We were in an explosive situation which jeopardized the entire mission. I simply defused the situation.
That's just beautiful. I mean, you really have a way with words.
He did get us out of it, Alex. Dwyer, you'd still be getting thrown around by those townies if he hadn't cut loose a few live rounds.
Look, Alex, I don't like the idea of gunplay either, but the mission was successful and nobody got hurt.
No, that's my whole point. Now, I don't call what happened today a successful mission. Naturally.
Look, we have to let people know we're serious. We just also have to let them know we don't want to hurt anyone.
All right, look, what are we asking here? We're asking that the school be kept open. That's all. Other kids are vandalizing their school. We want ours to stay open. Now, if we behave like soldiers and not a bunch of kids in a riot, we can win this.
Just got to be done by the book.
Yeah, that's all I'm asking.
It'll be done by the book. We stick together, we go the whole 9 yards.
Later in the film, Hutton talks about his childhood with a close friend, and that gives us an insight into Hutton's fierce determination.
My mother died. I was sitting in the hallway in the Army hospital. And I was worried as hell because I knew she was real sick. She had this bad kidney thing. So I'm sitting there, and my father comes out of the room and tells me that she's dead. He led me to this little chapel they had there in the hospital. He sat me down. He told me I could cry for 15 minutes. He gave me 15 minutes to cry, and after that, I wasn't supposed to cry again. So he left me alone in the chapel, and came back. He came back 15 minutes later.
Jesus, what did you do?
Well, I did what I was told. I cried for 15 minutes.
That's a good scene, and Tim Hutton is a good actor. This is a great performance coming right on the heels of Ordinary People. Hutton is so overwhelmed by ideals of duty, loyalty, and military courage, he allows himself and the students he leads to get backed into a tragedy. He barricades the walls, he sets up machine gun posts and guard stations. He tries to use military force as a bargaining threat against the National Guard. They're outside the walls. Taps is not intended as a realistic slice-of-life story of this confrontation. It's a hard-edged fantasy, a study of how kids can get swept away by idealism and authoritarianism. I admire this film, and I like it a lot.
Well, I know we went to the same movie. I don't know if we saw the same picture, because I thought this film was silly, laughable, confused. When I say laughable, I mean I actually laughed at it.
I think your response is totally off the map. I don't think there's anything in this film that makes laughter appropriate.
Well, what makes laughter appropriate to me is that I felt at some point that they were being very manipulative toward the audience. In other words, no one wants to see the kids hurt, okay? So kids, it's like in chase scenes. Remember when they wheel out a little kid? Most of us go, oh, come on, do they have to get to that? And in this film, I had that feeling. I said, oh, do they have to make their point, whatever it is about military school or military life or the military mind, do they have to throw us a little tiny kid about to be killed?
Have you seen Lord of the Flies?
Like it very much,
Famous
and
film.
like the book.
And like the book, okay. This is Lord of the Flies and Taps, it seems to me, could play on the same double feature. They're about the same subject. A tightly knit band of kids, alone against the world, and the way that their ideals and the things they've been taught by adults get perverted and distorted in the way that they do sometimes in an adolescent mind into an obsession.
Well, the only thing I could say is I feel that Lord of the Flies deals with kids turning on themselves. This picture, I think, is preposterous, because I think at some point what would happen would be that the adult world and these kids would mix.
Well,
Roger, I want from this movie one scene, and you know what it is? Where somebody says, hey, Tim Hutton, don't you understand this thing is blowing way out? And where he thinks, yes, it is, but I want to make a point.
That scene is in the film. That's what Timothy Hutton feels in the last half hour of this film. That's the realization he arrives at. And apart from that, though, you're bringing all kinds of logical, rational questions to a film where they're not appropriate. Of course, I could ask questions, too, like where is the adult faculty? How would the governor let the National Guard go this far? That's not what the film is about. It's an allegory about kids, militarism, authority, power, adolescents, adults. That's what it's about, not all of these logical questions that are going to turn it into some kind of a documentary.
Well, I think logical questions come into someone's mind when the drama isn't strong enough.
I disagree. Okay?
All right.
Good.
Taxi Zum Klo, which translates as Taxi to the Toilet, is our next film. It's a West German film that caused a bit of a sensation at this year's New York Film Festival. The film, which is often quite sexually explicit, tells a fairly common story, that of a man, a school teacher, who has trouble remaining faithful to his lover. The only difference in this film is that the man's lover is another man. One night, as the school teacher sits down at dinner, they begin to argue, and you can sense the tension in their relationship.
Was möchtest du für ein Stück haben?
Was willst du denn schon sehen, was ich haben möchte? Ich werde mir schon eins nehmen.
Mein Gott, jetzt habe ich mir extra so viel Mühe gegeben.
Oh, das ist genau das, was mich aufregt, dass du dir immer so eine Mühe gibst. Mensch, was meinst du, wie viele Leute in der letzten Zeit ich deinetwegen nicht besucht habe, nur weil wir uns ständig hier zurückziehen und du mich messest wie ein Schwein?
Na, mein Gott, dann koche ich eben gar nicht mehr.
Bernd, Mensch, das ist doch nicht die Frage, gar nicht mehr zu kochen, aber diese blöde Regelmäßigkeit, mit der du mich jeden Abend hier empfängst und betust und bemachst, das halte ich wirklich nicht aus. Ich möchte entscheiden, wann ich komme und wann ich esse und wann ich gehe.
Die Beziehung ist eben was Regelmäßiges. Anders geht es gar nicht zu machen, dass du das nicht verstehst.
Sie ist eben für mich nicht was Regelmäßiges, sondern ich will selber entscheiden, wann ich eine Laune drauf habe, dich zu sehen oder nicht. Dich nicht zu sehen, da brauche ich mich doch nicht abmelden oder anmelden bei dir. Mensch, das ist doch ekelhaft, ist das doch. Soll ich vorher anrufen? Herrgott nochmal.
Ach, Herrgott nochmal nicht, dann eben dein Ding alleine.
A lot of couples in the movies have had that kind of argument. This is sort of an autobiographical film by the director Frank Riplow, who also plays the school teacher. What recommends the movie is that it's very matter-of-fact, almost casual about its portrayal of the everyday details of the school teacher's life and his search for new experiences. For example, he is so driven to have sexual encounters that he even gets up out of a hospital bed and takes a taxi to a homosexual meeting place.
Wo geht's jetzt hin? Fahren Sie mich mal zur Siegessäule.
And he goes on to have an explicit sexual encounter. Now, what this man does is unconventional. He's actually left his hospital bed. But this film presents his every action. The style of this film is so matter-of-fact that it doesn't scream about what's going on. And we end up with a realistic portrait, I think, of another human life. And because the life is the life of a male homosexual, Taxi Zum Klo becomes an effective film in the world of sexual politics. I enjoyed it.
I have a lot of admiration for this film, too. I'm going to vote yes to it. I felt that the director, whose life it is, more or less, is very frank, very honest, very, as you said, matter-of-fact in what happens to him in his life. On the other hand, I'm not sure that this portrait is as positive as some people seem to think, some of the reviews I've read, and maybe even your review, too. I believe that this character is kind of sad. He's lonely. He's self-destructive. He has very low self-esteem, and he engages in sexual practices which are intended to degrade him, which reflects that opinion he has of himself. I think it's kind of a portrait of a man who is not as happy and as healthy as he could be, you know, within his homosexual identity.
Well, my reaction to that is, so what? I'm looking at this film from the fact is that we've had homosexuals portrayed in movies as people who are always ready to kill themselves or be killed, as flaming queens prancing around living rooms. And I'm saying, hey, this is an achievement. In the category of films about homosexual, this is...
Well, you're right. It is an achievement. But on the other hand, you said it was an effective statement for sexual politics.
Yes.
Are people who are not gay going to go to this film and say, hey, that's really
I have
a
no
great
idea
job?
what people are going to do. All I'm telling you is,
care.
as a film critic, I see a lot of films about homosexuals. This is the best. It's not much of an achievement because most of them stink.
But don't you feel that to some degree as a film critic you have to... It's a portrait of a man's life. What's your opinion of his life?
My opinion of his life is he got the same problems as a lot of people do.
And some others that a lot of people don't have.
Well, here's Sparky the Wonder Dog, our dog of the week who always picks out the worst movies of the week. But sorry, Sparky, this week you can take the day off because rather than tell you which lousy movie to avoid, Roger and I this week would like to review some of our choices for the best movies of this holiday season. It hasn't been a good holiday season for pictures, and yet we both believe there are some films worth seeing.
Gene, one of my most admired holiday releases is Reds, an intelligent epic starring Warren Beatty as American communist John Reed and Diane Keaton as the great love of his life. Their romance is played out against the backdrop of the Russian Revolution.
I know you're doing work here. That's good. But you got to have enough sense if you're trying to build up your reputation as a journalist to be in the right place at the right time.
I appreciate your advice.
Well, the place to be now is Russia.
You don't have to tell me what's happening in Russia. I read the papers.
Well, come with me. I want to work together as partners.
I don't want a partner, and if I wanted to go to Russia, I'd go alone. I wouldn't need you to take me.
Another great film in release around the country is My Dinner with Andre, a spellbinding display of conversational brilliance.
Wally, I mean, if there are insects bothering the plants, they will talk with the insects. And, you know, make an agreement by which they'll set aside a special patch of vegetables just for the insects, and then the insects will leave the main part alone. Things like that.
I agree with Roger. I think My Dinner with Andre is a brilliant film. And here are two more of my favorites. One is Ragtime, Milos Forman's Tapestry of America in 1906. The film features James Cagney's first performance in 20 years.
All right, come on, straighten up, Willie.
Are you ready, Mr. Conklin?
Ready? Ready for what? What do you mean?
You know that someone's been asking for you, don't you?
What is this? It's a joke, huh? It's a joke, right?
No joke, Willie. The library over there is worth millions.
So?
And people keep telling me you're a worthless piece of slime.
A great line. I also enjoyed the weird John Belushi, Dan Aykroyd comedy Neighbors, in which Aykroyd plays a suburban terrorist named Captain Vic.
Welcome to the end of the road, I guess.
It's a great house.
Thank you.
I mean mine. More rooms than we need, really, but I couldn't resist. It was a steal. Well, what's on the menu, pal? I'm starved. Ramona and I haven't eaten all day. We could eat a baby's butt through a park bench.
Another great line.
Yeah.
Those are some of Gene's picks and my picks for holiday movies we think you'll enjoy. Now let's take another look at the new movies on this program. Heartbeeps stars Andy Kaufman and Bernadette Peters in a whimsical, much too sentimental story of two robots in love. We both vote no. The story got awfully thin and boring, repetitive. But 2 yes votes for Cinderella, the Disney animated classic, now in re-release all around the country. The movie got my first yes vote back in 1949 when I was 7. People asked, do movie critics ever change their mind? Well, not me. It gets another yes vote now. We split on Taps, the story of military cadets who try to defend their school by force. Gene votes no. He thought the movie was silly, illogical, and laughable. I differ strongly with a yes vote for this allegory of adolescence and their battle with authority. Finally, 2 more yes votes for Taxi Zum Klo, the shockingly frank film about the life and many loves of a West German homosexual. We admire the film's honesty about the humanity of its characters, but one note, this film contains graphic sex scenes and may be appropriate only for adults.
Well, that's it for this week. We'll continue our Taps argument some other place. Next time, in a special sneak previews, Roger and I will pick the year's best movies with scenes from films that have made our top 10 lists, including Body Heat, starring William Hurt in a 40s-style story of murder and lust, Atlantic City, Louis Malle's portrait of a revitalized gangster in a revitalized city, and Raiders of the Lost Ark, the feature film version of a slam-bang Saturday afternoon serial. That's next week. Until then, Happy New Year, and see you at the movies.
Funding for sneak previews was provided by this station and by other public television stations.